Okay, good morning. Class today, as always, dedicated to Ili Nishmat Alidir Chai Avram Ben Rachaleo Mirtzi, the Shamash Devin Aliyah. I was actually talking with Rhonda yesterday and discovering more and more every day of how much Torah has been learned and is continuing to be learned. It's absolutely unbelievable, truly unbelievable. Okay, we are at the beginning of chapter 24, Perek Kaf Dalid, talking about the topic, the next topic, the second to last topic of the book is the concept that's called Yirat HaChet. Literally means the fear of sin. Technically, the word chet, even though we translate it into Hebrew sin, it doesn't really mean that. Chet means to miss the mark. Like if you shoot an arrow and it doesn't hit the target, that's missing the mark. So that's what a chet is, but that doesn't really have any bearing on today's discussion. And just as an overview, I think I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago when we finished the last chapter, he's going to tell us that basically there's a simple, pashut, basic meaning that everyone can do. And then he's also going to tell us it's one of the most difficult ones. So it's kind of some kind of a paradox here, and we'll see what he's talking about. Okay, let's get started. He says, look, I want you to realize that I'm putting this character trait, this idea of Yirat Chet, after everything we have done until this point. The fact that it shows up, the fact that this chapter, chapter 24, comes after 23 chapters of all these other topics, understand from this, he says, it should be enough to awaken us on the matter that number one, we have to recognize and understand the fact that this chapter comes where it does in the book, meaning after all the other things we've talked about, has to indicate to us that it's a very important, fundamental idea. It's also difficult to achieve it. That you can't really acquire this midah until you've really acquired all the others before. So there's two things in this sentence he tells us that he has never told us in this book until now. Until now, I've said, he's never said it directly, but I've said it in his name, that you don't need to be perfect in one step to get to the next step. It's not that you can't go through door number 3 until you've gone through door number 2. It doesn't work that way because you're never going to achieve perfection. You should strive to do your best, but perfection is not a great thing to want to be a perfectionist. But he is telling us that unlike other character traits, unlike things that came before this, where you don't necessarily have to be the best at it before you go to the next level, he says here, you have to really have acquired and achieved everything else until now. Zrizut, Zihirut, Nikiyut, Anava, everything, and to the best degree possible. Now, does that mean if you don't completely fulfill all those, so to speak, requirements or prerequisites, you shouldn't try to strive for Yirat HaChet? Of course not. What is the Yirat HaChet we're going to define? Again, literally just means being afraid of a sin. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't try. It just means you won't be able to achieve it completely because using an example like from education, a person who wants to get their doctorate, there are certain prerequisites. They had to do your 101s and the 201s, 301s, 401s, and wherever they're going to go into the next level. It's just you have to do it. And in some of those cases, without those fundamental classes, you couldn't be working on your doctorate because there's certain information that's lacking. So in order to really achieve chapter 24, he says completely, chapters 1 through 23 have to be solid with you. Again, does not obviate the idea that you can still strive for Yirat HaChet. That's one. Number two, he also says it's not easy. This is the first thing in the book he's telling us. It's not easy. Everything until now he has said either it's easy to do or it's going to be not so hard. Just work at it. Now he's telling us it's difficult. However, having said that, he's going to go back and change his approach on this in a minute. Let's take a look at the second paragraph of Perek Kaf Daled, chapter 24. However, I have to tell you that it's not just one topic. It's really two that break down into three, because there's going to be one approach to Yirat HaChet, and the second one that has a part A and a part B. Harishona kala me'od lahasiga. So now he told you before this is very difficult to achieve. Now he says it's very simple to achieve. What's simple to achieve? The first way, which he's going to describe in a minute. However, and he says, and not only is it easy, there's nothing easier than achieving yirat hachet in the simple manner. Again, to be explained. The second approach, kasha min hakol, is more difficult than all. So, what are they? He hasn't told us yet. He says there's two paths, two approaches to yirat hachet. Now we're going to see what they are. Yesh yirat ha'onesh, v'zehu hamin harishon. There is the fear of punishment. Yirat hachet. I don't want to do a sin because I don't want to get an onesh. I don't want to get a punishment. It is as basic and as simple as I'm not going to stick my finger in a light socket because I don't want to get electrocuted. Why don't I stick my finger into a burning hot stove? I don't want to get burned. It's not because I have some healthy respect for that stove. It's not because I love that stove. I just don't want to get burned. So too, the first approach of yirat hachet, which is the basic, is I don't want to do a sin because I don't want to get in trouble for it. Now, before I read the next sentence, it's funny because I had the same discussion last night in Tanya. You have to keep in mind, the book is written in the 18th century. Until the early 20th century, the status of women, not just in Judaism, but around the world, women they couldn't own property. They need their husband's permission for certain things. Women were definitely second-class citizens. They were given protection in Judaism through Ketubah and other ways, but it was the woman's general knowledge of Torah and Judaism and life was considered below the level of a man. Now today, it's unbelievable. Baruch Hashem, the opportunities and the abilities of what women can learn and do and achieve and grow and be leaders. It's absolutely fantastic. I wish I had. I'll give you one example. What's her name? Shani Tarragat comes to mind. Yael Ziegler. I mean, these women will forget more than I'll ever know my whole life. It's beautiful. Baruch Hashem. And it doesn't, and I'm not pandering. I'm saying this is factual that things have changed over the last 50, 75 years. Not even 50 years. It's less than that. Now, why am I mentioning all that? Because look at the next sentence. I didn't forget. What I just said applies in a couple sentences from now. So hold that thought. The second path, or the second approach to yirat hachet, breaks down into two sections. One is yirat haromimut. The way that you translate yirat haromimut is the fear, the awe of the grandeur of Hashem. We're going to see what that really means. V'zehu hamin hasheni yirat hachet chelek sheni mimenu. And the subcategory yirat haromimut is yirat hachet, which is a subcategory of yirat haromimut. And he doesn't explain yet what they are. He just uses titles, right? You have yirat ha'onesh, fear of the punishment. Yirat haromimut, fear or awe of the divine, the grandeur of God. And yirat hachet. So yirat hachet is yirat hachet. What does that all mean? So he says, I'll explain now, I'll explain to you now what they are and the differences between them. If you're just joining, we are in the third paragraph, depending on your printing, of chapter 24. Yirat ha'onesh ki pshuta. When it comes to the lowest level of yirat hachet, we say the fear of any punishment is exactly what it means. Simply, why don't we speed? Why don't you speed? Why don't you go through a red light? Is it because you have a healthy respect for the government and God forbid you would want to hurt the government? Is it you don't go through a stop sign because you just respect that stop sign? No, you don't want to get a ticket, right? And not only that, we know that sometimes people take chances. I'll park here. Hopefully I won't get a ticket. I remember when he first moved to Israel, about 6 months in, I had a car that was given to me for a few months that I was using as part of a program for Bnei Akiva. I didn't know the difference at all I've been driving my whole life, but in Israel, I didn't know certain symbols. And I didn't understand the difference on the sidewalk when it had blue and white, red and white, yellow and red. Yellow and red, of course, is a bus stop. Red and white, blue and white, you have to pay to park. So I parked the car near B'nai Akiva's office on King George, or right off of King George. And I came back to the car. I have a ticket. I said, what the heck? So I go running into the office of the guy who's like the Akaz, the coordinator of the program. I show him, I said, what did I get a ticket for? I parked where it's blue and white. He says, right. I said, what do you mean right? He said, you have to pay. I said, why? Doesn't blue and white just mean like it's okay to park there? He says, yeah, it's okay to park, but you got to pay. So, okay, live and learn. And red and white, that's a no-no. But people take a chance. I'm going to run inside for 1 second. I'm just going to jump in, run into the store and get one thing. I'll be right back. There's no chance a cop's going to catch me. Dafka, that's when they always do. So the reason you don't double park, the reason you don't go through the stop sign and speed and all that other stuff, hopefully, is because you don't want to get a ticket. You don't want to get the onesh. And that's why that is what a motivator is for some people not to do an Aveira. It's not good. It's not the best way to live, but it's something. Now, what does it mean? He says, Shadam yira me'avor et pi Hashem Elokav. A person is afraid to go against Hashem due to the punishments that Hashem gives out for an Avirah. Im laguf, im lanefesh, whether it's the person's physical body or their neshama, which is after they're gone, which also can be during their lifetime, but that's a different discussion. V'nezot kalavadai. Simple, right? That's simple. Because it doesn't require a lot of headspace to figure out that if I do something wrong, Hashem levels the playing field. By the way, we also know that when it comes to doing something good, that no matter if the person's rotten to the core, if they do something good, Hashem rewards them no matter what. When someone does something bad, we know he's erech hapayim. He delays his anger, again, anthropomorphically, and the punishment comes if the person doesn't do tshuva. Tshuva could be anything from doing what we would call colloquially tshuva, or in some cases, going through yisurim. Sometimes it's the actual person's passing away, acts as a form of tshuva, so or kapara for that individual. But whatever it is, it's like, don't do it because you don't want to get in trouble and do something with, and get punished for it. Everybody, which by the way, this is not necessarily true. Everyone loves themselves and is afraid to cause harm to themselves. Definitely not factually true anymore. And there's nothing that will distance a person farther from doing something wrong than the fear that something will happen, that there'll be a consequence. That something will not happen, something might happen to him bad. Now, this is now kicking the few sentences I said about women's status before. This level of yirat hachet is really only appropriate for boors, people who are amaratzim. They don't know much. Okay, they may know what an alphabet is, but that's about it. They really don't have too much connection. That person, that's okay. Or for women who have a lower level of intellect, and again, understand when he's writing and understand the time period. He says, that's fine for everybody else, but for you all, it's not appropriate. That's not the reason to not do an Aveira. Let's take it to an extreme. Why would a person not slap, God forbid, slap their parent across the face? Truly to the extreme. Is it because they're afraid of the punishment? Or is it because there's a respect for the parent? Hopefully it's for the second reason. Now, you don't train your child to say, look, don't ever smack me across the face, because if you do, you're going to get in big trouble. That's not really, that's not the goal. So what does it really mean? What is the more appropriate, more loving and caring reason to have yirat hachet? Let's take a look at the next paragraph. Hamina sheni hu yirat haronenu. The second category is the idea of the awe of there's a fancy word in English, exalted level of God. I like the word grandeur, not grandiosity. Grandiosity is not a good character trait. The grandeur of God, the romemut, it's really difficult to translate that word into English, but we'll use that. That a person distances himself from sin and doesn't do them. Why? Not because of love. He doesn't want the onesh. Because of the complete and utter respect that someone has for Hashem. How is it possible that a person can lower themselves? Or how is it possible that a person, a human being, shafal, vinimas, someone who's low, that you would do something against the great romimut of God? Who are you? Who are you to go against that? I don't know. I don't know if you've ever been in a position to meet somebody very big, a king, a president, a prime minister. Okay. How you act in that person's presence, I've mentioned many times, I think that without going into politics, that the president of the United States, the current president of the United States, a couple presidents ago, whatever his name, Barack, I couldn't stand them. I can't stand them. But if I was in the presence of the president of the United States, no matter what a fool I might think he is, I try to make a reservation for him here at Odat Ubim. They didn't want him either. I'm in the presence of the president of the United States. I have to act a certain way. It's not because of him, it's because of the office he holds. Now, this is not just the president, this is Hashem, and it's not just because he happens to be Hashem. Hashem is Hashem. So how would I even think about it? It's not because I'm afraid of chet. Let's understand the distinction here. The punishment. It's not because I'm afraid of the punishment. It's because I have respect for Hashem. How would I lower myself and do a chet? This is really not. First one, he says it's very easy. You don't want to get punished. Second one, the recognition and the awareness of your love for Hashem, your respect for Hashem, that you would not want to do something that goes against the Ritzon Hashem. Because how does somebody awaken this idea in himself? It only comes through introspection and thinking about the grandeur of God, and relatively speaking, how low we are. All these things are derivatives of intellect, common sense. He says, if you remember when we talked about Chassidut, piety, this was the second category of people, how they get into the level of piety. It's hitbonenut, it's introspection, it's thinking, taking the time to stop and think about your life, thinking what you're doing here, why Hashem has put us here in this world, and who Hashem is. Person, I say embarrassed here, doesn't mean a sense of, oh my gosh, I'm embarrassed, but I'm just going to use the word. The person is embarrassed and they're in fear as they stand before their creator to daven, to pray, to serve Hashem. That awe, that fear, that recognition of being present in the presence of God is praiseworthy. That the Chasidei Olam, the righteous of the world, the pious of the world, have been praised by. It's what Moshe says. So what do we have so far? We have one, what seems to be just two categories. One, very simple. It is, we don't do an Aveira, I don't want to get punished. Boop, that's it, Yirat HaChet. And I did my bare minimum. What did I do? I'm traveling and I have all the money in the world and I have the choice. I could stop at Motel 6 and stay there overnight. Or I have all the money in the world, and I could stay at a 5-star Waldorf Astoria. My daughter will help take care of you. Waldorf Astoria, and have 150. I don't know if it's good or not. 150 count thread, linens on the bed, and massage service. But I choose to take, not because I want to save money. I just choose to take the quickest, easiest, cheapest way out. I stay at the Motel 6. What would you think of somebody, if you picture somebody you know who's famously wealthy, someone you actually personally know? I'm not talking about movie stars that you don't know, but people you actually know. We all know somebody who's got more, as they say, more money than God. And he tells you about they went on a trip and they stayed at this Motel 6 and this Howard Johnson. You could think one or two things. Either all that money, that's how they got rich. They're cheap, right? They save all their money. As someone once said to a friend of mine, he has every last rusty dollar in his pocket. The other possibility is They don't really care about the accommodations. It's not, they'd rather spend the money on food, they'd rather spend on attractions. But I mean, the guy's got a trillion zillion dollars and he's spending, $25 a night for a hotel room, five, instead of spending X amount and, in respecting who he is. Okay, we are human beings. We're standing before Hashem. We have a choice. We're going to do it Avera or not do it. Is the Yirat Hachet, the fear of doing the sin, is it motivated because I don't want to get smacked? Or is it because I don't want to disappoint Hashem? I love Hashem. I have respect for Hashem. He told me what to do. So the only way you can get to that level, and there's going to be a deeper level of that we're going to talk about in a minute. The only way you get to that level is using your brain, using your intellect. It doesn't take a lot of brain power to think I'm not going to stick my hand into a burning hot oven to burn myself because I might get burned. I don't have to sit there, lehit bonen. Let me contemplate what is fire? It's one of the four elements. Therefore, if I touch this and this will happen. No, you're going to get burned. 1, 2, 3. There's no deep, dark secret there. But where there is a deeper, so to speak, secret, how you achieve it, the next level of Yirat HaRomenut is hitbonenut, is being aware when you're about to do something, being aware while you're doing something or not doing something, before whom you stand. This really is, and he mentioned it earlier in Chassidut, but he doesn't mention it here, da lifnei mi ata omed. Know before whom you stand. Next paragraph. Zot ha'yira shanachnu beveirua ata. This type of fear that I'm going to now explain, dahainu yirat hachet, which is what we titled this chapter. I titled this chapter Yirat Hachet. Vehi kamo chelek mirat haromemut. It's kind of a derivative or a subcategory of Yirat haromemut, shezacharnu, which I mentioned. Uchmo min bifnei atzmo, but yet, even though it's a derivative, it's kind of its own standalone. V'hainu. What is Yirat Hachet? Ki neinyanahu shehiyeh adam. Sorry. Person is constantly aware, fear, troubled about his actions, that he shouldn't do anything wrong. Or there should be something big or small or big, that he didn't properly give respect to Hashem. And to the greatness of his name. And here you see, they are intertwined. Why am I concerned all the time that I might do something wrong? Or especially why am I concerned? Because it's driven by Yirat HaRomemut. So they're intertwined, but he says they're also their own standalone. How are they intertwined? The goal in both, that I don't do anything against the greatness of Hashem. Now, let me read this next paragraph before I give you a little bit more idea here. Okay. If they're the same thing, if they're similar, why do I have two categories? But there is a difference between them. I'll tell you why I've given them two names in two categories. When does Yirat HaRomemut kick in? It's at the moment of action or inaction. I'm about to do a mitzvah. I'm about to go do a mitzvah. I'm about to do a chesed. I have the opportunity to do an Avera. At that moment, the question comes up. By the way, it's not necessarily consciously being done. I really do want to do this because I want to do it in respect for God. I don't want to do this out of respect for God. I want to do it the best way I can because of respect for God. That's what's called Bishat Ma'aseh. That's at the time, the actual moment of action. Dahainu. O b'shah she'omed u'mitpalel o oved, whether he's davening or he's doing a mitzvah, she'az yevosh v'yikalem. At that moment, he'll be embarrassed. He'll feel bad if he does something wrong. Yirash v'yirad mipnei rum kvodo yitbarach. He'll quake in front of God. O b'shah she'mizdamenet avera, or in the time when an avera presents itself, you could do. And he knows this is wrong. He stops to do the avera. He doesn't do it, not because he's afraid of the onesh, that's category one, but rather, he shouldn't do anything. He shouldn't do anything that diminishes the kavod of Hashem. Now, as a follow-up to this paragraph and as an introduction to this next paragraph, we need to talk a little bit of mental health tachlis as well. There is a very big distinction between doing something obsessively, doing something in a way that you can't really control, and consciously trying to make an effort to do your best at something. Whether a person is sitting in front of someone like Susie, or sitting in front of another therapist, or a psychologist, or a psychiatrist, or social worker, whatever the category the self-help person is in front of you, they will all tell you that certain actions that are mentioned in Mesilat Yesharim would absolutely be devastating and detrimental to someone's mental health, depending who they are. Someone who has an obsessive compulsive personality is going to be very different in how they may be told how to do a mitzvah versus somebody who does not have that personality. It could come in the area of Hilchot Nidah, it could come Hilchot Shabbat, it could come in many different areas. So right now we're talking about the normative individual who does not have the mental health issues that would prevent somebody from trying to achieve a level of Yirat HaChet. If I were to have someone come to me, first I'd send them to Susie. That's a different story. So I had someone come to me, and I knew their personality was such that it's OCD, it's whatever it might be, and I know for a fact that I'm learning this particular chapter with them, and they're going to try and do it. They're going to like, oh my God, I'm constantly being like, we're going to see the next paragraph next week. That like I have to be afraid all the time. No. I said, forget it. Don't even read this chapter. It's not going to help you. It's going to make your life much worse. So you have to also be aware of your physical health, your mental health, and that's part of what this is about as well. I'm going to stop in a second. I just wanted to mention to you, the next paragraph is going to quote a pasuk, which we've quoted before. I'm going to leave this as a little teaser, which is having said what I just said about mental health, it's going to quote a pasuk, which sounds like it's devastating to our lives. It's a pasuk in Mishlei, which is Ashrei Adam Mefached Tamid. Happy is the person who's always afraid. Like, it's great. You got anxiety, man. If I got this, I got you covered. Okay. So it doesn't mean that you cannot take that on face value. We're going to see the Gemara next week, what that really does mean. But it's going to be a follow-up to this. So just kind of summarize. There are three categories or three approaches to Yirat HaChet: simple, medium, small, medium, and large. Small, simple. You don't want to do the chet because you don't want to get punished for it. Number two, you do it out of, not because you don't want to get punished, but out of respect for Hashem, for the grandeur of Hashem. And the third one is, which we're going to get a little bit more depth next week, is similar, but it's not just when you're about to do something, but it's constant. You're always aware of being in Hashem's presence. We'll see what that what is a little bit next week, God willing. Meantime, have a good day and drink a lot of water. It's going to be hot for a number of days. And even if you're sitting inside, you could, the heat, yabish, you could dehydrate. Get the word. So please do take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful day.